migrating an on-premise SQL Server database to Azure SQL database. See, whenever we are doing our development, we always tend to do it with a local database. That means we might probably use a local machine SQL Server Express edition, or if we are in a network, we might use proper SQL Server, either standard edition or enterprise edition, or maybe a developer edition. But once the development of the application is completed, we have seen how we can move a web application locally developed into an Azure platform with the help of app service web apps. But what is that we have to do for SQL Server? We want to move all the SQL tables, stored procedures, triggers, and not only that, even some data which probably I have used for initialization. All that I would like to move from my on-premise SQL Server instance into an Azure SQL database. So what are the options we have for doing this? Basically, there are three popular options for this. One is we can generate an SQL script using SQL Server Management Studio. And once the local database SQL script has been generated, we can execute this SQL script onto a SQL database after connecting to Azure, again using SQL Server Management Studio only. Yes, one of the very common and popular option used. I'm also going to demonstrate the same thing. Alternatively, there is a open source application, SQL Database Migration Wizard, available on this particular link. You can download the same, and this will provide us an application where you can provide source as well as target, and it will do everything for us. Also, there is an option available in SQL Server Migration Assistant SSMA. It can also move data from Oracle, MySQL, Sybase, and so many other options, not necessarily only SQL Server. But of course, I'm going to restrict my demo to SQL Server Management Studio, and maybe a brief introduction to this also I'll provide. But first, what I want to do is, using Visual Studio, develop a new project. I'll prefer taking a complete web application so that I can demonstrate all the configuration issues which are supposed to be taken care of when we create a web application locally and migrate the web application along with database to a Azure platform. So here it goes. I have Visual Web Application, ASP.NET Web Application. Let's say Demo DB Web App. We can again, as usual, take either a web form application or a MVC application, our choice. More popular today's web form, sorry, MVC, and I'm choosing the same. Click on OK. Project template will be created. Now, what I would like to do is, in the controller, home controller, action method index, I would like to provide connectivity with the database. And I don't want to use entity framework. I want to write raw ADO.NET code for this. So first thing is, I should create a database, and I want to create it locally. So data connection, create new SQL Server database. Server, I'm giving it as ./SQL Express, and that is my local database. Say demo DB for Azure, some name. So this is going to create a new database locally, and I want to have the connection string for the same in web.config. So in my web.config, I'll provide a new section under configuration, that is connection strings, In this, let us say add some name. We will give demo connection string and the connection string property. Now how to get that? Ideally, right click on this, go to properties, and from property connection string copy and paste it here. So this is my connection string. Maybe yes, we can provide another important attribute, though in this particular case we don't need it. SQL system.data.SQL client. So my connection string is here in the configuration file. Now I go back to controller and write code here for connecting to database. So SQL connection, press control dot using system.data.SQL connection. Yes, that gets added on top is equal to new SQL connection, and here we should give the connection string, which I want to read from the configuration file, for which I'll add the reference to system.configuration. Yeah, it's already there, so no problem. So system.configuration manager control dot app setting system dot configuration manager added on top. No, let's add system dot configuration manager dot connection strings of demo connection string dot connection string. Mind you, this is local connection string. And here what I want to do, maybe fetch data from the database and display it on the view, for which under this I'll also create a table, add new table. I repeat, I'm creating a table in a local database first, ID, and I want this to be identity column, that means auto increment column, emp name, I'll call this table name as employee, simple table, where char of 50, and finally emp salary, which is, let's say, of type money. And I don't want to allow nulls for all this. Now update it, it will execute, insert create table, and the table will get created. Now into the same table, right click here, refresh, I would insert some data also. Let's put some dummy data, something just for demo purpose. Close it. And this data I would like to display in a form. How to get the data? For that, I'll need a SQL command object, which I'll specify the statement. I want to fetch all the columns from the employee table, and the connection is SQL connection. To execute this, we will use SQL data reader dr is equal to command dot execute reader, which will get me the cursor, and I will now go through that cursor one record at a time till I reach end of the cursor. And all that data which I am going to read, let's say I'll put it in some string. So str plus equal to dr of 0, which is nothing but actually id, or we can also mention the column name dot to string plus slash e. I'm putting tab, actually you can use tags, I'm not using tags. Then dr of emp salary, emp name, let's take first, plus I'll add PR here, break, because it's a web application. And it goes on in the loop. When it comes out, yes, I'll close the data reader, I'll close the connection. Ideally speaking, we can take a table tag better and close the table tag here. And in between, we can use TR, and for the first column, TD. I'm formatting HTML. And this TD, I'll need it here. Earlier TD we can close, new TD starts. Same thing comes here also in place of tab. And finally, we would like to replace break with closing TD and closing TR. The table is constructed. Now this table, which is constructed through concatenation, we now pass it to the view. And how to do that? Best thing is put it in view bag dot, let's say, data is equal to that string. Yes, obviously, if it is a project, I would replace string with string builder because a lot of concatenation that will degrade performance. But for demo purpose, it is fine. Now this view data, I would want to use it in the view. So right click on the index, go to view, whatever is existing, all this I'll delete. I don't need all this. And I just put here at the view back dot data. That's it. Now let's run this, and I should get the default data from my database in the form of table, the 3 rows. Error, execute reader requires an open connection. Perfect. I missed connection dot open. I directly executed connection dot close here, but I did not open. Yes, we should write here before we do execute connection dot open. Now run this. I'm running the application locally. I want to see the output. Oh, why all this? Because I have used this one. So instead, we should use here HTML dot raw. We want it to be as it is rendered without encoding. Right now, it is by default encoded. So save this, come back and refresh, and we should get the data in tabular form. Because as it is in raw format, it gets rendered now. Perfect. So I'm not interested in a lot of CRUD operations, creating, editing, deleting. I don't want to. Because my main concentration right now is how are we going to do this configuration when we move the application from local to Azure. That is the main and most important thing to be looked at. So once we have the base application ready now, time to publish. But before I publish, obviously I need this database on server. How do we get this database on Azure platform, Azure server? So go to portal. We have already created a database in the previous video, DemoDB. I would want to use the same thing. And for this DemoDB, we have the connection string. I'll copy this once again in Notepad. And I'll change. I wanted to use the admin user, and the password which I gave at the time of creating the database is user at the rate 123. And rest of the things all not needed. We can delete it. Here also process security info is not required. So yes, server name. Let's now connect to Management Studio. To Management Studio, first I would like to do is create a SQL script for the local database, and that SQL script I'll once again connect to this database, that is Azure database. I want to first connect to local database for creation of an SQL script. A lot of databases are there. We are interested in DemoDB for Azure. That's the one which I created before building the application. Here it goes. Right click, script database as new query. No, we want to generate the script. Generate scripts. When we are generating the script here, there are certain things we have to take care of. We want to complete database because right now we have only tables. It is showing you only tables. Otherwise, stored procedures, triggers, functions, all that will be listed. But anyways, we want entire database and all database objects. Choose that. We want to save the script. Let us say I'll save it in some folder in d:/Azure demos/database demos. Be my demo db as the name of the SQL script. So this SQL script is what is going to be generated. Copy this, click on next, source, all good. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, let me go back, click on advanced. And a few things we have to take care of here. And I've explicitly mentioned them in handout also. These properties will have to set at the time of creating the SQL script. One, convert UDT to base type. User defined data types are not supported on Azure. To convert them to their base type, change that to true. Script extended properties, set it to false. We don't want extended properties because they are also not supported in Azure. SQL Azure does not support use database statement. Change that to also false. And we want to have not only schema but also database. Rest all you can leave it as default options. Good enough. Along with schema, data is what we will have in the SQL file. Oh, something went wrong. Automatically it's restarting, so I'll have to redo those things. That's fine. Demo DB for Azure, task, generate script, next, next, path, advanced, change this, extended properties, use database, and here click on OK, click on next, next, and it will generate the script. Perfect. Script file is created from the local database. Now we connect to Azure. That is where this is demo server, CSS admin, and blah blah. They connect. Once we are connected, here we want to execute that script. So right click here, new query, and we can open the script. Actually, ideally we can open and directly open here. And certain things you'll have to make changes here. One, create database. Rest of it we can delete it. We don't need all this. All this is not required. Alter database also not required. Till we find the first create, delete everything. To create database, go will create the database. So actually this is also not required because database has been already created. Demo DB. In that database only, we would like to execute. Ensure that this is selected here. And now run demo DB. Something went wrong somewhere. There is a mention. Yeah, alter database. Actually, that is not needed. Anyways, that was the last statement. Everything else is done. You can now verify there is a table created here. And we can also see the data in the table. Remember, when you are connecting from Management Studio to Azure SQL database, you're not going to get the editor facilities, designer facilities. Everything you'll have to do is through script only. For example, you want to insert, we'll have to execute insert as query. Insert statement will be framed. We'll have to edit that and execute insert. Likewise, if you want to create a table, new table, it will only give you create table and you'll have to write code for creation of the table. Designer facilities we don't get for SQL database as we would get them for local database. So that is the reason we will always prefer first creating a local database and creating an SQL script, and after creating an SQL script moving that database to the Azure by executing the script on Azure connection. All done. Now how to use this in application? So what is important is this connection string is supposed to change after deployment. Of course, you can actually make the change here. Give this connection string, copy this and replace it here. The problem is after you replace it here, even when you are testing the application locally, it will try to connect to the Azure database only. But generally in production or in real time, what happens is for development purpose, we would like to make use of the local database only. But the deployed application in Azure should make use of the SQL database, Azure database. How are we going to achieve this? One easy way of doing this is whenever we have an application web.config, under that you will see there are two files web.debug.config, web.release.config. When we publish the application, we are going to choose whether it is debug configuration or release configuration build which we are trying to publish. Based on the type of configuration, accordingly, that config file will be selected here. So let us say I go for release.config, and in release.config, we already have an example here, connection strings. This same connection string, what we have here, I'll copy and copy into web.release.config, and these two attributes which are extra here, transform attributes, copy them and paste it for this new tag and delete the old one. Now what it is saying, obviously we are going to uncomment all this, move this comment up. What is it saying? If in the main configuration file, set attributes, if matches the name, that means if this name matches in the main configuration file, instead of using the connection string value of the main configuration file, we want to use the connection string as specified here. And here I am going to provide this connection string, that is Azure connection string. Very, very, very important. So what we did, we have web.config, same section we now have in web.release.config with two additional attributes, which are basically helping us to transform the connection string in the configuration file at the time of publishing in release version, so that if the name matches, the value of the connection string is used in the original configuration file will be this and not the one which is mentioned during development. So when we are running the application locally, it will use this connection string. But when we are running the application in production in web.config, it will be this connection string. So let's now publish. Right click, publish. We'll create a new resource group. Use basic one, good enough for demo. And then here we have services, SQL database. See, we have the choice of adding an SQL database from here also. That means if in Azure you have not created the database, you can create a new SQL server here, and to that new SQL server you can create a new database with a specified username and password. You can do that. But because we already have created the database in Azure, we do not need this particular option. Click on create. The web application will be created using the specified application plan, service application plan. And once it is created, we will try to publish it. And it goes. Whatever data we have in the table, we have seen that here, the same data, we are getting it in the output. So what is the connection string issue we have to take care of? Yes, if you are publishing a release version, we will use web.release.config. But if we are using the debug version, we will use web.debug.config. So ideally, I'll put the same connection string in both. And where are we mentioning whether it is release or debug? Right click, publish, and here we'll have the choice. Deploy, settings, configuration, release configuration or debug configuration. So this is the easiest way a developer can do. But what if the developer has already uploaded the application and developer has not taken care of editing the connection string? That means the person who is managing the application to portal has to now edit the connection string. So where is that provision? So go to your web application first. This is the web application we created. And here we are going to have application settings. Application settings. And in application settings, there is a section called as connection string. So what we'll have to do now is, whatever is the name used for the connection string, that is this value, same name we will put here. And the value here should be same as the connection string required. That means this. So we are telling now to the portal, or rather to the web application through portal, we are telling whatever may be the value of demo CS in the config file. Ignore that, but use this. I repeat, in case we want to overwrite the connection string other than whatever is uploaded through web.config file, then we will have to make use of this option. So what I'll do now is, just for demo purpose, I'll comment this in both debug and release, both I'm commenting. So right click and once again publish the settings, remove this, whatever is the local that will be fetched, click on next, publish. Now this will fail. This I haven't saved yet. It will try to connect to database, it cannot connect to database and it will fail. Why? Because the original collection string is not transformed, because we do not have anything in web.release.config and web.debug.config. We got the exception. Of course, because we are doing release version, error message will not be displayed to us, it will get custom redirection. Custom error message will take over and automatic redirection to error page will be done. But what I'll do now to portal I have provided the connection. I saved it. Now I come back and refresh this URL and we'll get the data. Perfect. Now let me go back to Studio, expand this, expand app service, demo resource group, expand this, files, and here I will have web.config. Let me show you the content of web.config. This is remote web.config is referring to local SQL database, which is wrong. That is purely because we do not have anything in web.release.config. So what is the understanding here? Ideally, a developer is supposed to have a transformed version of connection string in web.release.config if a release version is being published, and otherwise it should be in web.debug.config if a debug version is published. But in either case, if it is not done through configuration file, the best way to override the value of the configuration file, irrespective of whatever is the configuration file value for the connection string, the best way is to do it through portal. So go to the web application, application settings, connection string section, same name as what we have in the configuration file we give here, and give the specified connection string. Ideally, this is supposed to be connecting to the SQL database. Remember, same thing we have done for even app settings in one of the previous chapters. Now, one more thing I want to show you before I close this topic. Say I remove this. Here also we'll do that. Now close this and republish it. Now when I'm publishing, of course settings automatically will pull that up. Next, publish. Here you have to read this output window or rather activity window, and this is the important message. Auto connection string transformed into the connection string transformation has happened. Transform web.config using web.release.config. Whatever is published is clearly logged here. And now we will have the application up and running. Now of course you open the web.config file again and you will find the transformed version of the connection string. So now do we need this in portal? Not required. In portal we don't need this. Even if you want, you can delete it. Absolutely not needed. Even after deletion, save it, come back to the browser and refresh and you will still have the data. So I repeat once again very quickly, summarize everything at one place. Originally we will have connection string in web.config. What we should do? We should have a transformed connection string in web.release.config or web.debug.config. debug.config based on what is the kind of configuration we are publishing. This configuration files are supposed to specify the connection string of Azure SQL database, whereas this is supposed to specify the connection string of local database. But whatever may be the connection string in web.config or release.config and debug.config, if you want to override, you should do that through portal. Now, how to do it in portal? You have to go to portal, select the web application. In web application, we should go to the app setting, application settings, and under that connection string, and you have to use the same name. Connection string value can be different, but name should be same as what we have here, and like that we can overwrite. So this is how, whether you are a developer or you're not a developer and you're simply managing applications on Azure, in either case it is very important that you ensure proper connection string when publishing the application. I have demonstrated the same in handout here. Step 1, to generate the SQL script. After we have the SQL script, we execute the SQL script, delete the initial part of create and alter database. And after that, this is the code which I wrote in my index method. This is what I have written in the view, and in web.release.config, debug.config, we have to provide the connection string and then publish. Simple steps. Now, before I close, just want to take you to, you'll have this URL from where you can download. Just click on download, you'll get a zip file. Open the zip file, and maybe we'll have to extract this in some folder. Drag and drop here. And here we have the exe. Just run this exe. And now it is self-explanatory. This wizard gives you the option to analyze, generate script, and migrate database schema and data from SQL Server to Azure, Azure database to local, Azure database to Azure database also, all the three. So what is that we want? Analyze only, migrate, blah blah blah. So we want target to be Azure SQL database. Analyze and migrate. Click on next. It is trying to first connect to the local. So /SQL Express. Which database? DemoDB for Azure. Save login information for next time. Connect to server. All tables. Advanced options. Extended properties. False. Target server. 1 server. Next, ready to generate SQL script. Script is generated. You can save the script and return it so into file. If you want, you can save it somewhere else. Next, it is trying to connect to Azure. So provide the Azure server name here, username here, password here, continue, and I'm sure you will be able to, in single wizard, import and export data from local database and move it to Azure database. So this is also one of the options you might use, but of course, Management Studio gives you more control. You will be able to easily see the SQL script, make changes as per the requirement, and it is more advanced. It is for more advanced users. So that's all in this particular chapter. We have completed how to migrate data from SQL database to Azure database.